The sun bled out over the prairie, a dying ember sinking behind black ridge lines. Dust hissed across the yard, whispering like restless ghosts. Clara's boots struck the porch boards, quick, sharp, desperate. Her breath came ragged, tasting of iron and fear. Behind her, the door slammed. Ephraim Pike filled the frame, shoulders broad, eyes black as a dry well, whiskey sloshed in the bottle dangling from his fist. "Girl," he barked, voice rough as gravel. "You think you can run?" Clara froze. Lantern light spilled around him, painting the scar across his cheek. Her mother's house, the only home she'd known, stood hollow now, like a coffin with windows. "You sold the mares," she said, the words trembling but steady. "Mama's horses. You sold 'em for cards." Ephraim grinned, yellow teeth catching the light. "Debt's a hungry wolf. Had to feed it. That wasn't yours." He stepped forward. The porch boards groaned. "Everything here is mine, including you." Her stomach turned to stone. She backed into the dust, the wind whipping her hair across tear-streaked cheeks. "I'll never marry that brute," she spat. The grin vanished. In a blink, his hand flashed. The slap cracked like a pistol shot. Stars burst in her vision. The taste of blood filled her mouth. "Don't speak to me like that," he growled. "You'll do as you're told. Tomorrow you'll stand by his side, or you won't stand at all." Clara staggered, one palm sinking into the grit. Lantern light flickered behind him, a dying heart inside the house. The smell of whiskey and smoke pressed against her. Something fierce lit inside her chest. She rose, eyes bright with fury. "No," she whispered. He lunged, but she turned and ran, skirts snapping in the wind, boots hammering the hardpan. "Clara!" His shout chased her across the yard. "You can't hide from me. No one out there will find you." She didn't look back. The prairie stretched end, less and dark, a sea of shadow under the bleeding sky. Dust stung her eyes. The cold bit through her dress. Behind her the lantern guttered and went out, leaving only the hiss of the wind and the echo of her own pounding heart. The dawn came pale and pitiless, a thin blade of light cutting across the wasteland. Clara stumbled through the dry gulch, her dress torn and stiff with dust. Every breath scraped her throat like broken glass. The night's cold had given way to a heat that clawed at her skin. Her wrists burned raw where the rope had rubbed them. Ephraim's knots still left their mark, angry welts that throbbed with each heartbeat. She'd slipped free in the dark, but the memory of his voice clung like smoke. "No one will find you." The words rode the wind, cruel and steady. Clara's legs buckled. She fell to her knees, palms sinking into hot sand. Above, the sky spread endless and merciless. Buzzards circled high, black commas against the white sun. Their shadows slid across the ground, slow and patient. She whispered to the silence, "Lord, if you hear me." Her voice cracked, a dry reed in the desert wind. No answer came, only the distant hiss of shifting grit. A gust rose, flinging dust into her eyes. Tears blurred the horizon until everything became one smear of gold and ache. She pressed her forehead to the ground, the world tilting, breath shallow. Somewhere in the haze, Ephraim's laughter echoed in her mind. A girl alone is a coin waiting to be spent. Her pulse slowed. The sun hammered down. Time stretched thin, brittle as sun-baked clay. Then, faint, like a heartbeat through earth, came the sound. Hoofbeats. She lifted her head. At first only a shimmer wavered in the heat, a mirage of movement. But it grew, steady, deliberate. A dark shape cut across the glare, a rider on a coal-black horse, dust trailing like a veil. Clara tried to call out, but her throat gave on. Leah rasped. She dragged herself to her feet, every muscle screaming. The figure drew closer, sunlight flashing off a silver buckle, the soft jangle of tack carrying across the open waist. She swayed, vision narrowing to a tunnel of light and shadow. The hoofbeats slowed. The rider reined in. For an instant Clara feared it was Ephraim come to finish what he started. but the silhouette was broad-shouldered, steady, a stranger against the burning sky. Her knees gave, the desert rushed up, and the world fell silent, save for the soft snort of a horse and the steady creak of a saddle above her fading breath. The world returned as a low hum of hooves and the scent of horse sweat. Clara felt cool shadows sweep across her face, a break from the merciless sun. "Easy now," a voice said, deep, steady, carrying the weight of years. She forced her eyes open. A man knelt beside her, broad-shouldered, silver threaded through his dark beard. His hat threw a wide brim of shade, and in the glare behind him stood a black horse, flank gleaming like river stone. "You're safe," he murmured. "Name's Jonas Hale. Let's get you out of this heat." Clara tried to speak, but only a dry croak escaped. Jonas slipped a canteen into her trembling hands. "Small sips. Don't drown yourself." The water tasted of tin and life. She drank, each swallow easing the fire in her throat. Jonas studied the rope burns on her wrists, eyes narrowing. "Who tied you up?" Her gaze darted toward the empty horizon. "Stepfather," she whispered. "Ephraim Pike." Jonas's jaw tightened. "Figures. Heard of him. Mean streak a mile wide." He rose and offered a calloused hand. "Come on, my ranch ain't far." The ride blurred, sunlight flickering through dust, the steady creak of saddle leather, Jonas's quiet presence, a wall against the vast emptiness. By the time the mountains purpled with dusk, a cabin appeared on the ridge, weathered wood and smoke curling from a stone chimney. Lantern light spilled warm across the yard like a welcome home. Jonas dismounted first, strong arms easing her to the ground. "Careful now." The cabin door opened with a slow creak, the scent of cedar and coffee wrapped around her. Inside, a single lantern glowed, casting golden halos across timber walls. "Sit," Jonas said, guiding her to a chair near the hearth. He fetched a blanket, draping it over her shoulders. Clara stared into the small fire, its flames dancing like fragile hope. Her body shook, but for the first time since fleeing the homestead, the tremor came not from fear but from the sudden safety she could scarcely believe. Jonas set a kettle on the stove, his movements quiet, deliberate. "No one's gonna hurt you here," he said, "not while I'm breathing." Clara met his gaze, the warmth of the fire mirrored in his steady eyes, and for a heartbeat the vast, cruel prairie felt a little less empty. Night draped the prairie in silver and shadow. A thin moon hung like a scythe above the ridge, its light pooling across the ranch yard. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, embers pulsing like tired hearts. Clara sat near the window, wrapped in Jonas's wool blanket, her breath fogging the glass. A sound, distant, hollow, broke the stillness. Hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate. Jonas, sharpening a blade at the table, froze. The scrape of steel ceased. His eyes met hers. "You hear that?" he asked, voice low. Clara nodded, pulse quickening. They stepped onto the porch. The night smelled of pine and cold earth. From the far fence line, shapes emerged. 3 riders, their torches burning like fallen stars. Jonas shifted the shotgun across his arm. Lantern light from the porch spilled over the dust, catching the grit on his weathered face. The lead rider urged his horse forward. Lantern flame revealed the cruel grin Clara knew too well. Ephraim Pike. "Evening, Hale," Ephraim called, voice thick with whiskey and arrogance. "Heard you been keeping what's mine." Clara's breath caught. Jonas's stance never wavered. "She's no one's property," Jonas said, calm as a winter river. "Turn back." Ephraim chuckled, the sound dry as snapping twigs. "That girl owes me, and a man's debts don't vanish in the dark." Ephraim chuckled, the sound dry as snapping twigs. "That girl owes me, and a man's debts don't vanish in the dark." Jonas lifted the shotgun slightly, barrels gleaming in the moonlight. "You got one chance to ride out. Take it." The hired guns flanking Ephraim shifted in their saddles, uneasy under Jonas's steady aim. One spat into the dirt. Ephraim leaned forward, torchlight painting his scarred face in demonic hues. "You think you can keep her from me? You can't guard her forever." "She doesn't need forever," Jonas replied, voice like iron. "Just tonight." A tense silence stretched, broken only by the restless snort of horses. The prairie wind whistled through dry grass like a warning. Ephraim's grin faltered. He spat, the torchlight catching the spray. "This ain't over." With a sharp tug of the reins he turned. The others followed, their torches flickering like dying stars as they rode into the dark. Jonas lowered the shotgun but kept his eyes on the horizon. Inside, Clara exhaled, trembling. Jonas stepped beside her, hand steady on her shoulder. "He'll be back," he said softly, "but so will I." The night settled once more, the distant echo of hoofbeats fading into a cold, watchful silence. Morning seeped across the prairie in a hush of gold and ash. Clara woke to the scent of coffee and cedar smoke, the cabin quiet but for the soft crackle of the hearth. Jonas stood by the window, broad shoulders cut against the dawn, his gaze fixed on the fence line where last night's hoofprints scarred the earth. A knock split the stillness, 3 firm raps that carried the weight of law. Jonas opened the door. A lean man in a dusted duster stepped inside, hat low, badge glinting in the pale light. Sheriff Calder. His eyes were the gray of a storm about to break. "Heard tell Ephraim Pike came calling," the sheriff said, voice even as a well-worn trail. Jonas nodded once. "Brought. Had 2 guns. Left when he saw sense." Calder's gaze slid to Clara. "You all right, miss?" She tightened the blanket around her shoulders. I think so." Her voice trembled like a wind-blown reed. The sheriff removed his hat, respectful. "Word is Pike's been stirring trouble in town. Cards, drink, debts piling high. Folks say he's desperate." Jonas poured black coffee into 3 tin mugs, the steam rising like morning prayers. "Desperate men are dangerous," he said. Calder sipped, eyes never leaving Clara. "If he laid a hand on you, I need to know." Clara hesitated. The memory of Ephraim's slap burned fresh on her cheek, the rope marks raw on her wrists. He hurt me. Sold my mother's horses. Said I was payment for his debt." The sheriff's jaw tightened, the muscles ticking like a coiled spring. "That's enough for a warrant." Jonas set his mug down with a quiet thud. "You'll need help bringing him in." Calder gave a slow nod. "I'll ride back to town, gather a posse. You 2 stay put. Lock your doors when the sun drops. Pike won't give up easy." The prairie wind pressed against the cabin walls, carrying a faint echo of last night's threat. Clara looked from the sheriff to Jonas, fear and fragile hope warring in her eyes. "Will it ever end?" Jonas placed a steady hand over hers. "The law's on your side now. He can't run from daylight." Calder tipped his hat. "Justice rides slower than evil," he said, stepping into the brightening morning. "But it always catches up." The door closed, leaving the cabin wrapped in a fragile, waiting silence as the sun climbed, sharp and bright, over the endless, watchful plains. Night fell hard and heavy over the Hale Ranch, swallowing the prairie in a blanket of shadow. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the faint scent of smoke and dry earth. Inside, Clara sat near the hearth, the fire reduced to glowing embers, her hand, D's, clasped tight around her knees. Every sound outside made her flinch, twigs snapping, distant hooves, the soft scrape of leather. Then it came, the thunder of hooves on the dirt, rapid and deliberate. Lanterns bobbed in the darkness beyond the fence line, firelight glinting off metal and eyes. Ephraim Pike had returned, and he wasn't alone. Jonas stepped onto the porch, shotgun cradled like an extension of his arm. His boots sank into the dust, steady and unyielding. "Get down," he whispered, voice low but firm as the torches crept closer. Clara's stomach churned, fear making her hands shake. She ducked behind the root cellar door, peering through the cracks as Ephraim and his gang emerged from the shadows. Their horses snorted, restless, hooves scraping the hardpan. "She's mine," Ephraim snarled, torchlight flickering across his scarred face. "And no one stops me." Jonas's grip tightened on the shotgun. Not tonight. Not ever again. The first shot cracked through the night, echoing like thunder off distant hills. Sparks flew as Jonas fired, sending one of Ephraim's men sprawling into the dust. Lanterns toppled, painting the night in chaotic streaks of gold and red. Clara pressed herself into the cold earth, heart hammering. The smell of gunpowder mixed with pine smoke, stinging her eyes. She clenched her teeth, willing herself to be silent, to survive. Jonas moved like a shadow, firing, ducking, shouting commands that cut through the panic. Ephraim cursed and swung his rifle, eyes wild with rage, but Jonas held the line, a wall of resolve against chaos. The wind carried the screams, the gunfire, the pounding of hooves across the prairie. Yet in the center of it all, Jonas never wavered, his stance like iron, his eyes locked on protecting Clara. As the attack wore on, the night seemed endless, a maelstrom of fire, fear, and desperation. But the ranch held. Jonas's strength, the steadfast walls, and Clara's hidden courage kept the darkness at bay, a fragile heartbeat of hope in the midst of violence. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the first faint hint of dawn began to whisper, promising a reckoning yet to come.